President Trump, facing a growing nuclear threat from North Korea, has issued his own threat of, quote, fire and fury like the world has never seen, unquote. You heard it here first, world. America is going to give you the world's most epic case of herpes. The Trump Report starts now.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
That's right. Welcome to the Trump Report. I'm Christian Bladt. I'll explain our musical selection in a moment. As always, Christian DMZ, at Christian DMZ, Twitter, Instagram, both of those things. Don't forget to follow the show at Trump Report ABTV. Tonight, we're joined by the lovely and talented Brooke Solis at Brooke Solis TV. Yes. You can say hi.
Hi, guys. I'm always happy to be here, and I love it when you introduce me because you always have such nice things to say.
And the even more lovely and even more talented than Brooke Solis, Scott Moore.
Wow.
See that you said I always had nice things to say, so I decided to take it back.
Come back at you with
but to be fair, Scott is very lovely. And he's also very talented, so you can't really take offense to that.
She's going to come back with you with fire and fury right now, full force.
Not in the herpes way.
No.
Not a la Usher.
Although that would be an interesting show. And Scott Moore at S-Man80, thank you both for being here. So, so watching The Detectives was sort of a reference to the team that Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller has. And I could have gone with Hall & Oates' Private Eyes, and I was like, it's probably a little cooler to go with an Elvis Costello song. But these are the things that are important to me when I prepare for the show. Not reading information, getting familiar with the facts. No, it's what song am I going to use?
Life is a song. I mean, I sit there at work with a crazy job, and I just think of songs in my head when people say certain lines.
Do you have songs in your head when you're tweeting at Mitch McConnell in the morning?
I have songs in my head all the time.
We really do need to do a segment on your back and forth.
We do, I know.
We need to just print them all up and read them.
Well, I need Morgan Freeman to come in and read the tweets.
We may have, maybe not Morgan Freeman, but someone who sounds a lot like
someone
him.
that can fit in our budget.
So a friend of mine who would do it for free. But anyway, so Robert Mueller,
much fun.
He's got 16 lawyers. That's a lot of lawyers.
That's a lot of lawyers.
And 20 other staffers at his disposal. So that was my thinking, like, you know he's got some private eyes. He's got the detectives because they're going to get the good stuff. You know, that's what you need. And I thought, we talk about this. We sort of cram it in towards the end of the show. So I did want to start about this. And then, of course, North Korea might nuke us during the course of the show.
Right.
But we're still going to start with this. Scott, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to sort of an overview, your thoughts on what the special prosecutor is investigating, what it seems like he's likely to find, and then last you can say what you hope he finds, which kind of know. But what do you think that is most likely to happen?
Your thesis dissertation.
Right.
That's right. I'm gonna just sit back and drink a flask of whiskey.
Well, it seems like that he's now looking at financial crimes, and that's something that Trump is very uncomfortable with, as we know, because that's why he didn't want to release his tax returns. And because he's got so many different entities, so many different businesses involved with these financial crimes, like money laundering could be a possibility. There's just a lot of deals that have been going on between him and his family members, and also some of his
the kind of thing that if he had never run for president would nobody's really going to pay that much attention.
Exactly.
If you're just an a-hole real estate mogul in New York. There's plenty of those, He's not Leona Helmsley, you know what I mean? Right. He's all right. But now he's president. It's like, well, now we got to look at everything.
Right, and the fact of the matter is they are, and that's what really scares him right now, is the fact that they are going to dig up some things that he thought were safely buried that are now going to come back to the surface, and that's why, you've heard these rumblings that he wanted to fire Jeff Sessions and have a recess appointment, which, of course, the Senate did not allow him to do that.
Which I think we talked about that last week.
A little bit, but they actually went on recess. And
every 3 days, somebody has to come in and, I don't know, they, read the phone book or something for, 5 minutes.
To basically stay in session, so that way he can't... Which was pretty impressive, actually, when you think about it, when your own Republican Party... doesn't trust you.
When they did that to keep President Obama
you can
from
understand.
making an appointment, it made sense. But it's like, no, we don't want our own party's president
to actually make a recess appointment
so
either.
he wouldn't be able to fire and replace someone. So anybody that he would have to try and put in there would be confirmed. They go through the grueling confirmation hearings.
And they're also trying to make it more difficult to fire special prosecutor. There's some bipartisan bills that have been introduced to make it for this very reason. And I think, again, Trump hopefully realizes that if he does try to go that route of firing the special prosecutor, that could lead to basically the end of his presidency at that point.
I don't think that he has the ability to directly fire him.
Right, but if he had gotten someone else, right,
for example,
or
fire him.
exactly,
Right.
it would be very catastrophic to his presidency.
To your point, you're getting some interesting people kind of teaming up on this. Tom Tillis and Chris Coons had introduced something, and Lindsey Graham and Cory Booker. There's a 2020
right.
Dream Team ticket. Come on. No, but anyway, so, basically, if Trump were to try and fire Mueller, that there'd have to be it would be reviewed by a 3-judge panel, which doesn't sound like enough judges. But, it's still like.
And basically, he could only fire, or like you were saying, that someone else on his behalf, because now his attorney general had recused himself. So if he had an attorney general that hadn't, he could technically fire the special prosecutor. But anyways, the point is that there would have to be a reason behind it. It couldn't just, you want to fire him because you don't like him. It had to be because he
down and he pledge his loyalty.
Exactly, because he wouldn't pledge loyalty, and he said he wasn't going to go into your financial records. So basically, like, he has to prove that there's reason that they have done something, bad, as far as, what their job is to do. You can't just say because he donated to a Democratic campaign or something, or exactly. So there has to be reason behind something that you did that warrants you to be able to be fired.
In 2001, he rented an Inconvenient Truth from Blockbuster Video. He's fired. Yeah, which probably could happen.
Yeah, but there has to be
no
real.
Longer a Mar-a-Lago
But that's
member.
But that's the thing that is fascinating to me when you think about it, is the fact that this guy was the FBI director for 12 years. It wasn't like he's just some political hack, and he was appointed by a Republican president, and now they're trying to go around and basically try to make him look like he's a political hack for the Democrats, and find things about him that have conflicts of interest. It's fascinating to me. I mean, to think of someone who was an FBI director for 12 years is now being looked at as this partisan,
I mean, that someone who was the FBI director is now spearheading a witch hunt, obviously.
Well, of course,
that's really what's happening.
Yeah.
So, obviously, as they investigate all these things, there can be evidence of other crimes that'll come up, any kind of financial misdeeds. That's sort of what you're talking about. And that could lead to indictments, sure, all the way up to the president. But it seems like even if none of it touches him, it's going to be people in his company, his family. Jared Kushner maybe a little bit more worried, So it's just kind of interesting. But before we get your thoughts on this, Brooke, this is sort of what we alluded to last week, where there's the Watergate aspect, is the obstruction of justice, where you're interfering and trying to obfuscate. Yeah, that's right. That word actually came to me just now. But that's what you're trying to do. And even if you see, that's the thing, is you're trying to sort of misdirect the investigation when maybe nothing actually happened. So that's like, oh, you got to cover up the break-in, even though you really didn't know about it. So it just seems like there was a time to just be like, yeah, you know what, let's just turn everything over to the special prosecutor and let's not get involved. But obviously somebody like Scott here thinks that there probably is something he's hiding. I'm just sort of looking at the other way, that just to consider that maybe there's not anything he's hiding, but he's just like, I don't know, I don't want them to get this close.
Or maybe he's afraid that something that he doesn't realize that he's done wrong might come up. So he's
That's
like,
true.
just in case. Although I don't believe that. I'm of
No, but there could be something that he did
something
before he was president that, now it's like, you really shouldn't have done this, and here's
when
why.
When you're a con man, you're constantly looking behind you.
Right. And the fact, exactly, and the fact that he has so many involvements and so many different companies involved in things, that there is probably something there, and he knows that. And even if he doesn't, like you said, even if he doesn't know directly, he thinks there could be something there. I mean, but obviously there's a fear because he refused to release his tax returns. It still goes back to that. It's like if you were an open and you were not afraid of being caught, you're making yourself look awfully guilty by trying to cover it and hide it and thwart the special prosecutor from doing their job. I mean, so it looks like you're hiding something. And when you don't release your tax returns, it looks like you're hiding something, even if you're not.
Brooke, why don't you share?
I'd say that he's hiding something.
Yes.
Yeah, why don't you share with us some of the potential crimes?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's so obvious that there are financial entanglements, whether it's Trump himself or it's Jared Kushner, who has openly already said that he got these loans from Russian banks, a VEB bank that has close ties with the Russian government, as well as Deutsche Bank, which has financed some Trump tower or some Trump commercial buildings, and then they pulled out, and now they're trying to separate themselves. So that's a given. We also know that there's Foreign Agents Registration Act, that there's been problems there because of Michael Flynn. Now Jared Kushner, who's blaming his secretary and said, oh, she accidentally submitted it when I didn't put the 27 other people that I've just managed to put on. Paul Manafort, for example. We know that that's also an issue. The other issue, of course, when we think about Russian entanglement with the campaign, we know that there was a computer hacking and computer fraud in terms of the stories that were put out and abuse. And I think that there might be some entanglement there, because if you think about the one time that Don Jr. was going to meet with the Russians, they were talking, I believe, not just on info on Hillary, but I think that was when, I think 2 or 3 days later, the Podesta emails came out. And now I can't say that they're directly related, but it is awfully fishy. So that's just...
that's the whole reason. Look, that's the whole reason you get a special prosecutor, because it's all fairly fishy. And
it is.
You know, if you dig into it, it'd be like, you know what, it just smelled like fish, but actually it wasn't really that bad. Then that's fine.
Worse.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, there in no way does it help Trump for this to get wrapped up quickly. I guess if he absolutely was 100% sure that there wasn't anything that he had to worry about, then he probably would still drag his feet on it, because there's no reason to let it get wrapped up. Just to sort of refer back to Lindsey Graham, I had made a note that he said that he felt like it would be the beginning of the end for Trump if he fires the special prosecutor. So that'll be interesting.
Was he saying... Oh, didn't he also, maybe this wasn't Lindsey Graham, but he had also made some ominous warning regarding firing Jeff Sessions? That if that had happened as well, that there would be, like, I don't know if he said hell to pay or something southern of that nature.
Yeah, I feel like Lindsey Graham wouldn't have said. Maybe he would have said heck to pay. I'm just guessing.
But yeah, I mean,
of that nature, where he was warning Trump. Yeah,
and it would not be good for Trump to do that. And I think we've noticed he's sort of backed off a lot of those things lately, and he's not going after Jeff Sessions and and
when
obviously
he's not playing Jekyll and Hyde to Bob Mueller.
There's a few comments in the chat. Lawrence Bakery points out, it's a quote, he says, "It's not the crime, it's the cover-up." Exactly.
Right, exactly.
R. Scott Brown, not Senator Scott Brown. His failure to release his tax data is a clear indication that he's dirty. I feel like you actually sent that from your phone, logged in as Scott Brown, because that's what you always say. And once again, Lawrence Bakery, Jared Kushner using his influence to help investors and their families receive E85.
Right, and all the ones in China, and they're still involved with that.
Right, with Ivanka, the whole
involvement with his family too, with the real estate investments and things from Chinese investors, and
I mean, there's so many illegal acts that are occurring, not only with the emoluments clause, which we've talked about in the past
and it's even, you can always take a step back from illegal. It's just like questionable. Like if you just put all the questionable things together, it's like, we just got to look at it. And
his life is questionable. That's on the whole.
Sometimes you have to get married 3 or 4 times to get it right. It's all right. Look, it happens to the best of us. I mean, look how many times it took Elizabeth Taylor. Anyway, we should get
I'm going to go for Elizabeth Taylor status.
You're going to try and get married 8 times?
I'm on divorce number 1.
Okay.
I'm ready for number 2.
So you have 1 on the punch card. You'll get your eighth divorce will be free. Anyway, so let us know what you think, everyone. And also, aloha, right back to Once Upon a Time 518 Alex. That is a long login. Anyway, and let us know your thoughts. You can tweet us at TrumpReportABTV. And we will always share your thoughts if we can. You can tweet us during the show, and if not, we'll read them next week. Anyway, I alluded to it in the beginning. Let's talk about North Korea. So the nuclear program is posing a serious problem for President Trump. And there are intelligence reports, according to the Washington Post, that say they've crossed a major, this is a quote, a major threshold in its quest to become a fully fledged nuclear power by producing a miniaturized nuclear warhead that can fit onto a missile. My first question, how miniature? Like, are we talking like Lego size?
No.
Because then it's like, okay, that's, that creates like a pretty nasty pothole. But it's just how small is it, And I think that's an important question. And, I quoted him, but let's talk about President Trump's reaction. It was very subdued, completely rational. Right. Just kidding. What he actually said was, quote, "He's been very threatening beyond a normal state, and as I said, they will be met with fire, fury, and frankly power, the likes of which this world has never seen before. the president said, arms folded and voice raised to reporters at his New Jersey golf club. Which, if you think back through history, Scott, I'm pretty sure that FDR's Fear Itself speech and Churchill's We Will Fight on the Beaches declaration of war, those were pretty much both issued while wearing a golf shirt that prominently accentuated their man boobs, don't you think? You know, all good things happen at golf clubs in New Jersey. But obviously, it was just so funny to read that it's like, you know, he's having his working vacation, which, considering how little time he spends in the White House, it's kind of like been one fairly long 200-day working vacation. You know, and
just change the location.
Yeah, exactly. It's a change of venue.
Since the White House is a dump.
Well, that's what we hear. So anyway, I would say let's start with Brooke. Your thoughts as you hear about, first, North Korea, you know, having some nuclear ambitions and President Trump's response to it.
Well, I feel like these are two privileged man-children having a back-and-forth fight. They no longer have their daddies to fight for them or take up for them. So it's like, no, I'm going to say this or do this. No, I'm going to threaten you. And what's sad is that our democracy in America is the one that's caught in the middle. And, of course, unfortunately, South Korea, too, because they're probably the ones most at risk.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just really unfortunate that this is his way of responding. I don't know if you guys were at Politicon, but Charlemagne the God was there, and he spoke about how Trump speaks and kind of his influence in our culture and political culture and hip-hop culture. And he said that Trump is akin to a battle rapper, right? Going back and forth. And that's kind of how I felt when I read his statement. His statement was basically saying, don't start none, won't be none, right? I don't know.
That's pretty much
in
what
the
he was
words
saying,
of
yeah.
Lil Jon, I think, is the one who said that in one of his songs. But I think he even said they best not something.
I think that's actually what I just read. And
when I heard him say that, I was like, okay, wait, are they battle rapping right now? Like, what's
yeah, he's been very threatening beyond a normal state, and as I said, they've been met with fire, fury, frankly, power, the likes of which was never seen. There was something I thought I had taken that. I did read that. Yeah,
they best not come at us again, and I was just like, what? So,
which basically he said, "Oh no, you didn't."
Oh, no,
that's
you
basically
didn't.
what he tweeted out, and
I've got bigger nukes than you, I guess, and.
Okay, to be fair, I mean, he does.
He does.
Yeah.
This is one thing where, you know, he's not just bragging, you know, like making up for his little hands or whatever. I mean, he really does. And I guess...
But to be so flagrantly, like, just throw words out
there
like
on
that.
Twitter to
and
in the
all
public.
Of our, exactly, and our lives are at stake is
yeah.
sad. And
I mean, I think that the right approach is obviously... publicly, you don't engage. You know, Kim Jong-un is like a heckler at a comedy club. You can probably get away with just completely ignoring him because, you know, Kim Jong-un doesn't tweet like President Trump does because I think there's only like 1 hour in the morning where like the hamster that runs in the giant wheel that powers the internet for the whole country, and then he gets tired. So, you know, he can only do it like 7 in the morning. So, but, you know, it's North Korea, and obviously anybody who has any kind of nuclear weapon. Look, I've seen 24. Anybody can have a nuclear weapon, and there can be problems. Right. But I think that this isn't really the guy that you need to be so tough with. You know, just like, you know, I think it's probably more prudent to say something like, well, you know, they should really be careful. You know,
mean, it's just a testament to Donald Trump's lack of emotional intelligence. We know that he is not emotionally mature and that he doesn't really know how to act in certain situations. And there you have it, like in its most obvious way.
Right. And I think it's also a way for him to, and I know it sounds horrible to politicize it, but it sounds like a way for him to cater to his base because
of course.
He knows he's already losing some of those people. Even Kellyanne Conway admitted that much, is that, you know, his base is even starting to turn away from him. He has a terrible approval numbers, so the only way to do it is to go up, and we said this from the beginning, and it sounds so jaded, but is a way to be able to have that wag the dog type thing where you're having some type of war or some kind of distraction from the other things going on, like the Russian investigation, the lack of the fact that he's achieved nothing in his 200 days, although he tweeted that he did. One of the most achieved presidencies in their first 200 days, which is not true because he didn't pass a single major piece of legislation. He's a complete failure. So this is a way to distract that.
He has been on Fox and Friends a lot, though.
And it's a way to distract. I don't think any
president has ever been on Fox
I know, right?
Friends
as many times.
Much,
I know. Well, you can claim that.
Yeah.
But it's dangerous to then put real people's lives at risk. Because we know that, yes, I mean, we can go in and steamroll through North Korea in whatever somebody was saying the other day, one of the generals, 15 minutes or whatever. It wouldn't take a lot. However, they do have a lot of weapons. You have to remember that Seoul, South Korea is only 35 miles from the border of North Korea. Right. So you're already going to have millions of people. When I was in Seoul, you actually, in your hotel rooms, you have gas masks in your hotel room because that's how close the threat is all the time. They are always constantly thinking about that. So you are going to potentially have thousands upon hundreds of thousands of people that could be killed.
We have a large military
you
base
have
as well.
You have a whole Southeast Asia that can be destabilized because now you have a vacuum there in North Korea. And who's going to fill that but China? So you're going to have, more of China's power influence in Southeast Asia. And the U.S. is not going to be able to have a strong presence there without, again, doing something like in Afghanistan or Iraq, where now we're there with 100,000 troops now stationed for the next decade. More than we have now. We'll have to double that. And now we're going to be invested there and in Afghanistan, which is still something we're dealing with, and Iraq. And we just, again, don't have the ability to spread ourselves that thin and be able to still do what we need to do for our troops, as we already have issues and we know, and then to be able to support everything economically at home. So a lot of issues.
In the chat, people are bringing up some good points in relation to this that I wanted to get to. And if you're watching live on YouTube right now, you can join us in the chat. Or if you're watching on YouTube after the fact, you can leave a message. And I always check them before the next week's show. And maybe we'll read them on the show. But Daryl in the chat says, I'm legit worried about this. I think so are we. I think there's a lot to be worried about because it's somebody like Kim Jong-un who has, even if it is a nuclear water balloon, it's still nuclear. Yeah. And Danny H. points out, what about Guam? They're a territory. If North Korea attacks them, it's a declaration of war on us. Exactly. And I mean, that's sort of what the second wave of coverage of this story was. Is like, yeah, it's pretty much a bullseye on Guam. So it's like, well, we have to, we have to do something if we feel that Guam is in any way threatened. And I think that it's weird because obviously none of us are old enough that we lived through, like the Cuban Missile Crisis, Cold War. I do remember the threat of Russia that was always looming and like, oh my God, the Soviet Union. And, just that whole feel of like there was always, well, at any point we could all die. And that's not this, but that's like, this is scarier in a way because this guy's such a wild card. And
I think the two of them are wild cards when you really think about it.
You don't know which one I was talking about.
I know, right?
I was talking about Kim Jong-un, but, and...
I actually thought you were talking about Trump.
So, see, there you go.
That's what
and
they're
you
both.
Just don't really know what it would take to provoke him in a way where he's like, you know what? I already have enough statues to me. It'll be okay if I die.
Right. I would think that McMaster and Kelly, though, would be advising him more prudently to not stroke the flame on this and consider a more diplomatic approach.
But they're probably working at the White House while he's, working from the
right in New Jersey. I honestly, I don't think Kim Jong-un is going to try to send a missile and go after Guam because he's basically signing up for his own suicide by doing that. And I just don't think he would do that unless he finally felt like, Trump had threatened doing a preemptive attack. I think if there's something like that, then they're going to go all out. But I don't think they're going to make the first move because they know they're basically resigning themselves to suicide and that he's ending his power right there. So he's not going to do that. I don't think he's going to be the first one to actually. It's going to be the threats. It's going to be like he's always done and say, we have a right to do whatever we want. We're a sovereign nation. We're going to have our nuclear warheads. We're going to do our test missiles. We're going to do the stuff to protect ourselves. But I don't honestly think that Kim Jong-un is going to make the first move to do that. Because he is. He's just ruining his
And you alluded to the Chinese
power
earlier, and obviously they have a very vested interest in what happens in that region, but also here because of how much, but also because of how much money we owe them. Yeah. They don't really want anything to happen. I mean, they want to buy everything up.
Right.
But it's like, well, they want us to pay them back first. Oh my God, storage yard resident is right there. His father was stationed on Guam in World War II. Well, thank your father for his service, storage yard resident. Glad to see you. I felt like I haven't seen you the last couple weeks, but I don't always stare at the chat, but we're always glad to see him. Yes,
I'm curious of what, if you guys think that Trump supporters are supportive of his actually being as staunch as he's being with Kim Jong-un. And
I think if you like Trump, you like one of the things that appealed to you was that he shoots straight, figuratively and literally with his nuclear weapons. He'll
but
he'll
at
talk
which
tough.
point do they start shaking in their boots and saying, "Oh, wait, maybe we've taken it too far"?
They probably see it more like, "Oh, this is with North Korea. We're going to be okay."
Right. I think it's
North Korea.
It's more of the America's might, and the power of the military, and they're very into that and thinking we're going to go out there and kick butt and we're going to win.
They're thinking it's like basically it's the same thing as getting into a war with North Dakota, you know, and be like, I think we would win that, you know. So I think that they're not that worried about it, and I think honestly people are pretty excited, you know, that he said this.
Right.
Not excited about what could happen, but they're like, yeah, stand up tough to this guy who's just a punk. And
I mean, yeah, they loved it when he was promoting violence at his campaigns and telling police to be.
But Storage Yard Resident, in the chat, we know that you're a staunch Trump reporter, but also supporter. I that was actually a slip of the tongue, but I tried to seem really clever. Like, yes, you are a Trump reporter, but a Trump supporter. Let us know what you think about his comments. About
I would just add, I think also a lot of Democrats, you know, a lot of the hawkish Democrats actually like, you know, having that forceful military and going after and being like, we're mighty, we're, you know, so it's not even just a Trump supporter or even a Republican thing. I think it does tend to cross both parties and across the spectrum that people do feel like, oh, yay, America, #1, like our military power is, you know, no other country can even attest to it. And you know, people like that when he went back and did, what was the bombing with the cruise missiles back in, was that March or April, was Syria? Like, people loved it, including a lot of Democrats. So, you know, I do think a lot of people do like that, but it's just the fact of how far you're going to take it and what are you going to risk as far as American lives, but also all the Southeast Asian lives that would be affected by this.
Yeah,
and
I mean, I think
where the fun kind of ends when you start thinking about another quagmire and that we're going to be drawn into.
Right, but pre-quagmire, it basically gets to the point you're talking about, which is best summed up in the musical quote from Team America, World Police, America, fuck yeah. So want to talk a little bit about climate change because we do not talk about that very much on the show because
it's a
I
hoax,
always
right?
feel like it'll end up being a whole show. And and if somebody thinks it is a hoax, please say that in the chat. I always want to hear from the other side. There was this federal climate change report it's done, and it
was leaked.
Mysteriously got posted before it was approved by the Trump administration.
Sean Spicer.
Yeah, no, that would be funny.
As he left, he just threw it.
Scaramucci.
I was gonna say maybe the mooch. You know, you don't know. You don't know who. Yeah. So there's a report by scientists from 13 federal agencies conclude that Americans are feeling the effects of climate change right now, and that statement would directly contradict claims by President Trump and members of his cabinet who say that the human contribution to climate change is uncertain and that the ability to predict the effects is limited. So it's probably not going to get approved. And, you know, I don't know what they'll have them change. But sort of as a secondary thing that came up about this, as I was reading that there were reports that the USDA has, and that's not a mistake, it's not the EPA, the USDA has been discouraged from using the term climate change, you know, for talking about any sort of sustainable agriculture. It's just, you can't say climate change there. So I guess maybe there's a war on climate change. Instead of actually trying to fight it, it's more trying to fight the discussion of it. And I've always been a firm believer that I didn't ever like anybody, including former Vice President Al Gore, saying that the debate is over. No, you can always talk about, like, well, what about this other evidence that might say otherwise? Not just, well, we don't want to believe that. You know, if there is a conversation to be had, have that. But while there's also evidence that says, hey, these 13 federal agencies say that there's something going on right now, what can we do? Or is it too late? Because if it's too late, tell us that too, by the way. Like, no, you know what? This time to do that was like 50 years ago, and nobody listened. So, you know, just start building a space station, I guess, and then we'll be fine. So, Scott, your thoughts on what this says about the future of the planet, and how much damage you think the Trump administration will do, assuming that they just basically ignore this.
Well, fun fact, I'm chairman of the Los Angeles chapter of the American Meteorological Society, and we meet, actually I'm trying to plan the annual meeting for September. And there's actually, believe it or not, there is a struggle with a lot of meteorologists and climatologists on, you know, the politicizing of it. And some people are like, no, there is no, you know, it's politicized. And majority of scientists, including meteorologists and climatologists, do agree that there is noticeably climate change. But what I go back to tell people all the time is when you see the pollution in parts of China and certain parts of the world, and you see how bad that is, it's just like, why would you just not want to help even if you don't believe in the climate change part of it, why would
Just
you not want to help
air cleaner, yeah.
with and water and everything? Why would you not want to help like minimize pollution? Why would you not want to have more stringent stuff on pollution when you see and you know that it's not good for the planet to be spewing out exhaust everywhere and through power plants and coal and vehicles and all that stuff and airplanes, and why would you not want to work on making that better? That's all I say to people is like we should all be working on solutions that help. Yes, I get economically, but we can see that there are a lot of positive ways of being able to work economically and have green jobs and green pollution strategies in place and really help the planet, because it's not even just for us, it's just generations down the road, and we know that we're having an effect on it. There is no doubt. Now, whether or not you believe that it's up to a detrimental level or that we're really affecting climate, or is it more daily weather, we're having extreme weather all over the world, and it's just a matter of time before we go back to that point of no return. Is it now? Have we already passed it? I don't think so, but I think if people really do work together and really help, just take better care of the planet, it's better for everybody. And I don't know why there's such a resistance to science, and I don't know why there's such a resistance to trying to make this into a political thing. And it's really sad because it really shouldn't be. And the funny thing is, well, not funny, but the thing is that Republicans used to be very big on the environment. I mean, the EPA and everything was started under Nixon, and Earth Day started in '90 under George H.W. Bush, and Republicans used to be very pro, balancing out the economy with, taking care of the planet. And somehow along the line, the past 20 years, it's now turned into anti-science, anti-anything, and it is sad. Because, they've had the same thing in Florida. Governor Rick Scott has basically said you can't say climate change at all if you're working for the state government. And you already see the issues down there in South Florida. You see that they have more flooding just daily in South Beach just from high tide. And let alone we start getting a major hurricane or something to come in, and as the sea level rises, it's going to make a really big, huge inland flooding situation in South Florida. And we have not had a major hurricane since 2005 down there.
Right, and you would think that people would maybe take a little bit more notice, and of course they have, but I'm talking about the people that are staunchly,
that live there, yeah,
kind of resistant to any of this, talking about there. But when you see storms like Hurricane Katrina, and I guess it was Superstorm Sandy, right. It wasn't just a hurricane, and you see like that flooding in downtown New York, and you're like, hey, yeah, that might be a problem. Like, even if you're like, oh, I hate everything about Al Gore because he's kind of creepy and there's allegations and I didn't want him to be president, that's fine. You can discount him. But there's things that he says and other people say that you're like, oh, well, I'm not a scientist, but maybe a scientist can look into that. I'm not going to try and stand in the way and complain about that.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think the problem is, like you said, this politicization of climate change and of course the narrative that's happened, that's evolved around climate change, because it has been more of a party issue. It's turned more into a new narrative where Republicans can claim that it's a hoax because they want to see that everything that has to do with how our democracy ran for the past 12 years as part of the problem with the swamp, right? The establishment. They've created this problem, the establishment, so that they can milk us for more money, right? Because at the end of the day, I think for most people, it's about the economy and economics and where's my money going, and are they making up a problem so that they can take more of our money? Because how are they going to line their pockets? And I think that's how a lot of conservatives see climate change. Now, if we could separate it and make it not something that's political, but something that's, like you said, science, and we have real experts that aren't backed by any Congress people or lobbyists, and start to make that divide, I think, which is where we were back then.
Right, and
then we have
Scott
more of a
referenced meteorologists, and there are some that disagree, and it's like, great, but let's not shun them.
No, they're in the minority of that, I will say, but
let's let them talk about why they think that this isn't happening, and even if we don't convince them, it's like not anyone who disagrees with us doesn't get to talk, because then that just sort of feeds the, well, they must be onto something.
No, and I agree. They should have a platform to talk. But climate change is almost like watching hair grow. It's like you don't see it because it's so gradual and it happens over time. But we've seen that the average temperatures warmed up, but it doesn't mean that's going to be constantly hot everywhere, because people say, oh, well, we had the huge blizzard, but that's the thing, is you get more extreme events. You'll have colder winters. You can have hotter summers. You have heavy snow where you don't normally get that kind of snow. Rain, you get weird patterns like we had in California. We had 5 years of drought. Then all of a sudden we got a huge wet winter that happened, and it's not in the equal balance anymore. You're just getting one extreme versus the other. And that's what's happening. So you're going to get the crazy weather, and it doesn't. And again, people are like, "Well, we haven't had all these big hurricanes," and that's because it doesn't. It changes wind patterns, and everything is so gradual that you're not going to see it overnight. And that's the thing. If they can't see it right in front of their face, then they have a problem believing that's an actual problem.
Pollution, you can see that. You can't feign statistics
right,
on that either.
To Scott's,
but even in China,
I was going to say to Scott's point, I went to China 4 years ago, and it's crazy just the way it like hangs there, sort of like fog. But you're like, oh no, this is no fog. This is really
This is
nasty.
smog. And what they do there, like they are wanting to do here basically, is they tamp the numbers down. So what you're actually not seeing the accurate numbers of like what the pollution particles are, because they don't want people to see that the particles are that high, even though you can clearly walk outside the door and see that the pollution is horrible.
In Beijing it was bad, but then when you go to some of the smaller cities, it's even crazier. So we can, like I said, we can always talk more about that. Storage Yard resident did answer the question that I asked. He said that he doesn't want there to be a war, but he feels like it's very important to be ready to defend yourself if there is one, which makes perfect sense. But you don't want to basically be the kid with the stick that's treating the beehive like it's a piñata.
Like we don't need to be preemptively going in there.
As always, we're running a little low on time, so there was something that I do want to talk about. Is former CNN commentator Kayleigh McEnany was hired as a national spokeswoman for the Republican National Committee. And look, we can talk about what a lot of the media coverage on this issue has been, that it signals further Trumpification of the Republican Party. But what we really need to start with is just how out of touch with reality this woman is. Tweeting in 2012 that Domino's Pizza is better than any pizza place in New York City. And on separate occasions,
and how can you trust her?
Saying that she wished there were more Pizza Hut and Domino's in New York. She was lamenting that she was having quote-unquote gourmet pizza. It's not as good as Pizza Hut. This woman is a threat to all that is decent in America, and she should be stopped. Oh, yeah, there's some stuff about birtherism, but seriously, Domino's?
I know, how can you trust somebody that's going to say that when you're comparing to New York City pizza? I saw that and I was I was already concerned about her. But anyway, obviously before this news even happens, just last week, there was that weird video that was on President Trump's Facebook page where she was doing, and for those that are listening on iTunes, I'm using the biggest air quotes I could possibly muster, a newscast that basically was from Trump Tower, and it had the Trump logo behind her. And it was what she was saying is real news. And of course, if you say it's real news, you say it enough times, people are like, well, this was the real news. I'm so glad we finally got that. Scott, I'll start with you. What do you think about having someone like this be the spokesperson for the Republican National Committee? As a Democrat, you're probably ecstatic that she's out there at the forefront. Well, no, actually, it's scary to me because, like you said, the more people see the stuff that they think it's true, and the more that Trump and his ilk say it's fake news, fake news, fake news with everything else, the more that people start believing this stuff, and that's what's scary. It's very frightening that we've gotten to a point like this. And it is like they're taking a page from North Korea. That's why I feel like him and Kim Jong-un are very similar because, as you know, North Korea has there was a whole article actually about the woman that's been doing it since the very beginning. She's like in her 70s now. There's one woman that basically reads all the things that whenever there's serious news events that come up in North Korea, she's the one. And North Koreans know that when she speaks, that it's serious news. And that's what it makes me think of with this story is like she's going to be the person that when we hear from her, then we know it's important Trumpian news. But yeah, it's
so
scary.
She's a modern day Tokyo Rose, basically.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
It's very Orwellian.
It is. It's very.
All of a sudden, I thought, oh my God.
I thought Fox News was already the propaganda.
Big Brother
we had to go another step.
And now this is how we're talking.
George Orwell wrote several books. So Fox News is 1984, and Trump TV is Animal Farm, and we'll see what we all end up living in. Brooke, when you hear that someone like this is representing, one of our two major parties, Do you feel like Scott does, that this is sort of a dangerous person to have out there? Is this someone who...
Her personally, or just the entire
the kind of
idea
person who she is? I mean, obviously we had fun talking about the pizza thing.
Her pizza
but that pizza,
Right.
it does bother me.
It does.
But,
Well, that's what her opinion is.
It's very indicative that
Yes.
she has an opinion like that, which
Right.
is insane. But anyway, I mean, I don't know. What do you think this says about where the Republican Party feels like they need to head? You know?
I mean, obviously,
like turn into the Trump curve.
So I got word that every morning Trump gets a big folder.
I saw this.
Sent
Go
to
ahead.
him
You explain.
of all of the positive news, and someone's paid to do this. I think like $89,000 they're paid a year to bring him the positive news.
I don't care. I have no morals. I would be happy to do that for $89,000 a year.
Republicans' alpha male, seriously, he's actually a real snowflake. He needs this positive news in the morning, and I think they're creating this little Trump TV, aka propaganda TV, is his way of continuing to have the positive news flow, because there's only one other place he can potentially go, and that's Fox News, and it's not always positive because they have to report on what's really happening in the world. And
Well, do they?
Well, not on Fox and Friends.
they're supposed to, and they can't make up stories all day long. So of course Trump had to resort to this. I think that we should be alarmed. We should be really worried, because I think we're smart enough not to let this grow into something greater. But when you speak as to her personally, I don't really know her. Every time she's commented on CNN, I kind of turn the channel or wait, because she's never really said anything that was particularly substantive. So I don't know about her personally, but I just think the platform overall is Trump's way of continuing to stroke his ego. And, he gets the folder in the morning, he gets a folder in the afternoon or the evening, because he needs that ego boost, that constant reinforcement.
Brooke also has a little one, and this is the way I approach things with my son Felix. He gets milk in the morning,
right?
He gets it in the afternoon, and then we're all much happier.
Exactly.
you got to just like, it's time for some milk. So maybe that's just what he needs. He needs a nice little cup of milk.
He needs a
with
sippy
a little
cup in the morning.
He absolutely needs a sippy cup.
And a baba at night.
There's one final thing we're going to talk about, which ties directly into this before we wrap it up. The Alabama Senate primary is coming up, and that doesn't sound necessarily like something that should be exciting, but both candidates now have strongly tried to embrace Donald Trump. I guess the one, Senator Luther Strange, was on board for President Trump to begin with, but Representative Mo Brooks had been sort of battered by attack ads saying that he was skeptical about Trump. Now he's like, no, I really like Trump. And I hate Mitch McConnell, too. Scott, sort of our last point here is, do you find it surprising, or does it just say more about Alabama that they're actually very blatantly embracing, like, no, we really support President Trump? Did you expect more people to be pulling away, or...
No, I don't at this point, because there's a few states that are heavy Trump, like West Virginia,
Alabama's certainly one
Alabama, and don't forget you have Roy Moore now that's running, and he was the former Chief Justice there in Alabama who was actually kicked off of that job, and it's happened twice now, and yet he's still running and still has a good chance to win. No, not at all. It doesn't surprise me at all. In fact, it would surprise me if it was the other way around. He's going to have his supporters till the end. There's just like Richard Nixon, he still had 24% approval rating the day before he resigned. So there's always going to be that core of people that are still going to back him.
Is that the same approval rating that Trump has now? Doesn't he have
it's getting
24%?
close.
Oh, okay.
It's like 33% now. It's actually just a little bit below, because we had George W. Bush that was in the upper 20s by the end, and he's already down in the low 30s right now. So yeah, I mean, he's going to have his core no matter what happens, and a lot of the support are going to be in more of the rural states and the heavily Republican states like Alabama and West Virginia, and it's not a surprise. So no.
Our final thought for
what was
the
your
evening
question again? Whether or not I was
are you surprised that in Alabama both members of the Republican Party in this Senate primary are both like, oh my God, we love Trump. We can't get enough Trump. They're trying to out-Trump each other.
Of course not. It's Alabama. I mean, Alabama. I'm from Texas. Not at all. Nothing surprises me with his core group of supporters, and I think that right now it's just about kind of jumping on the Trump train to continue to retain that constituency for themselves. Of course, if things change, I think they'll change as well, because that's what politicians do.
Right, they'll jump
off. They
off.
go where the money is. They go where the people are. They go with the team that's winning. I mean,
right, and it'd be the same out here. I'd be surprised if someone that was running for office out here in California all of a sudden said, "I'm for Trump." You know, that's not going to be good for them.
Right, because
they know
all
even a Republican out here is going to be careful about
Republicans
that.
would be like, "No, of course, I don't support Trump."
They're going to be keeping arms length
I'm not
distance.
that kind of Republican.
So it's just where you live and where you're at, and what's going to be the best support for the local areas to be able to run and win. So
the actual final word will come from Storage Yard resident, who I was going to give a shout out to because Brooke said Trump train, and the person who's been he's been the conductor of the Trump train since we started Trump versus Hillary over a year ago, is indeed Storage Yard resident. Anyway, thanks to everybody who joined us in the chat. Thank you to Scott Moore at SMan80, Brooke Solis at Brooke Solis TV. I'm Christian Bladt at Christian DMZ. We'll be back live next Tuesday, August 15th, 7 p.m. Pacific right here. Brooke will be back with us. Yeah. Chelsea will be back with us. Scott will not, so it's just going to be me and the ladies. Make sure that you follow at Trump Report ABTV on Twitter, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, guys.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.